Good afternoon, everybody. It is 1 o'clock Eastern Time. We're going to get started on today's webinar. My name is Tom Doyle. I am the President and COO of SpotOn Networks. Today's session is going to last about an hour, and the topic is in-building wireless solutions, what building owners need to know. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I know a lot of people are still kind of getting on, but we'll proceed. A little background about SpotOn Networks. We are a New Haven, Connecticut-based company. We've been around since 2004. We are, frankly, the trusted name in managed Wi-Fi and in-building wireless solutions for the MDU and MTU industry. We have about 800 networks in about 35 states that support various wireless voice and data services, including a number of IP-enabled applications like energy management, patient tracking, security, surveillance, equipment monitoring. We essentially sell three solutions to the MDU, MTU community, three products. We sell user-safe Wi-Fi, CellBoost, and Wi-Fi Plus. So again, thank you for joining us today. Couple administrative notes about today's webinar. Everyone on the webinar is on mute, so we're going to minimize the background noise. There is a control on the right-hand part of your screen where you can submit a question. We've got about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation reserved to answer questions. The big news, of course, is that at the end of this, one of you will be winning a 42-inch IP-enabled, Wi-Fi-enabled TV. So we're going to make that announcement at the end. So if you're hanging through the presentation to the end, we're going to make the announcement, and then we'll contact that person after the webinar to figure out how to get them their TV. And lastly, we will be emailing a recording of this web event for future reference to everybody. So that's the administrative part of the presentation. Specifically, we've got a number of things to discuss in the 45 minutes. We hope by the end of this webinar we shed some light on a couple topics. The big one is the new FCC regulations that became effective May 1st of this year around signal boosters. We're also going to cover a topic most of you probably are already familiar with, and that's why indoor wireless coverage suffers in large buildings, large MDU, MTU type buildings. We have identified, frankly, 5 different solutions on the market for solving various in-building wireless solutions. We're going to go through those to give you an idea of what's out there in the marketplace and where you may be able to look for to get whatever particular problem you've got addressed by various types of technologies in the market. We're going to go through the effect of the FCC regulations on some of these 5 solutions because they do impact some things that you need to know about. Again, we're going to go through the best solution for your property and finish up, frankly, with what the future holds for in-building voice coverage. Joining me today on our webinar, I've got 2 folks. Thornton Bertoli is SpotOn Senior Network Analyst and resident CellBoost expert. He's been with us since 2007 and is responsible for the architecture and design of all of our in-building cellular networks. Also joining us is Matt Ames, who's an attorney for the law firm of Hubacher and Ames. Matt's bio is listed here. He is an expert in various aspects of telecommunications law, and he will be explaining the FCC report and order in a lot more detail than I am going to. He's also going to explain how it affects building managers and owners. So, just to lay the groundwork for Matt and jump right into this thing. So, the rules have changed relative to signal boosters. The FCC issued its report and order on February 20th, 2013, and those rules and regulations have just gone into effect in the last month and a half or so, May 1st. And they essentially did 3 things. Number 1, they legitimized and defined standards for the 2 different categories of boosters, consumer signal boosters and industrial signal boosters, and it defined what those are and the technical standards around those 2. It also established criteria to minimize interference that can exist between signal boosters and wireless networks. A big issue, obviously, for the carriers, for whom spectrum that we're rebroadcasting in these buildings. And finally, it required very specific labeling for both consumer and industrial boosters. So that's kind of the heavy lifting part of the report and order.
Dude,
you know what? In terms of available solutions, with the FCC's report and order, building owners have essentially 5 possible solutions to wireless problems, and we've articulated them here. We're going to revisit these solutions in a lot more detail later, but from a 20,000-foot perspective, you've got consumer-grade boosters, you've got distributed antenna systems, you've got what are called small cells, and there's different varieties of those. You've got what we call our CellBoost 2.0 product, and lastly, you've got something called Wi-Fi calling, which we'll get into in a lot more detail at the end. So we will define for you by the time the presentation is over how each one of these solutions might solve a problem for you. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Matt Ames to describe the FCC report and order in a little more detail. Matt? Matt, are you out there?
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, all right.
Always going to be technical difficulties, Matt. We apologize. Matt and I are not in the same place.
Yeah, that's okay. I was talking real fast, so let me talk even faster now. I just wanted to thank Tom and SpotOn for giving me the chance to participate. Just a quick word about me and my firm. I know we actually have some clients on the line, but Hubacher and Ames, we represent apartment owners around the country in negotiations with the various carriers, both wireless and wireline, and the cable operators. We've also in the past represented some of the national real estate trade associations in issues at the FCC. I just wanted to say up front, we're not representing anybody in particular on this call, and I'm just trying to present an objective view of the rules with a little bit of perspective from the real estate industry. So with that as background, let me get into, we can go to the first slide about why the rules were adopted. Just some historical background in terms of how we ended up here. Signal boosters are not new. Most people are probably aware that they've been around for a long time and have been used in remote areas, on farms, and people who had to travel a lot, and in large facilities like sports arenas. Now they started to get more common as cell phones became more common. People were using them in more and more dense areas. And between the increase in the use of the boosters and the increase in cell phone use, the wireless carriers are starting to have issues with interference, and at the same time, the manufacturers started to recognize that they might have some regulatory concerns. They were never really heavily regulated, and nobody really objected to their use because they basically improved coverage for people. But as the interference issues became more important, then people started to get concerned, and a number of people going back to the mid-2000s, both the manufacturers and the carriers started filing various petitions at the FCC, basically trying to get some clarification. So, so the FCC ended up taking that up and coming up with the existing rules that developed out of a compromise that had been proposed by the providers and the booster manufacturers. And the key point that comes out of the order at a very high level is that the FCC will always protect the rights of the users of licensed frequencies, and that's a basic principle to keep in mind in this context. The compromise was the manufacturers get to still make and sell equipment, but they have to produce equipment that minimizes the possibility of problems. So we go next to a little bit about what the rules actually do. The FCC created 2 basic classes for regulatory purposes. There are now consumer signal boosters and industrial signal boosters. The use of any kind of a booster requires the consent of the carrier whose frequencies are being used by the booster. Let me talk a little bit about consumer boosters. The FCC defines them specifically as devices that are marketed and sold to the general public for use without modification. In other words, basically, you're supposed to be able to go into Best Buy or your equipment store and just take one off the shelf and plug it in, essentially. Now, you're not allowed to sell a booster as a consumer booster unless it meets the FCC network protection standards, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And it has to be the manufacturer has to get it certified by the FCC. So what's happened over the last year and a half or so is that the manufacturers have gone through the process of developing new equipment and getting it certified, and now there are a lot of new models out there